Flying at night and in weather was a requirement for air defense fighters during the Cold War, because the Russians could easily come at night. The F-106 was an excellent night fighter with excellent radar, good instruments, but with only one engine and a few backup systems, things could go awfully wrong awfully fast. This evening, I was supposed to take off at 1:30 in the morning and go north to meet a target coming down from Canada. It was cold. There were dark, low clouds that were spitting snow. I started my engine, and the airplane just seemed to come to life. The power surged through it. The hydraulic pressures came up. The controls moved. The lights glowed. Different warning lights flashed, and I went through the routine checks prior to flight. I routinely pressed a test switch, which cut off normal electrical power and brought on emergency power. I had no idea that only an hour later that test would save my life. It was dark and a light snow was falling as I taxied out and lined up on the runway for takeoff. I held the brakes, ran up the power, looked at my instruments for one last time, released the brakes, lit the afterburner. The afterburner flickered with fire, and I could feel the sudden acceleration as it pushed me forward. I raced down the runway at over 100 miles an hour, pulled back the stick, and rose into the black sky. I soon broke out on top of the clouds, and there was a beautiful moon and a beautiful night for flying as I climbed further across the Great Lakes and turned into Canada, looking for the enemy airplanes that were coming in. One of our own bombers was my practice target as I intercepted him as he came in from over the North Pole. He used electronic countermeasures to try to jam my radar, but that didn't work. The F-106 is excellent against electronic countermeasures. I got my target and turned around and headed back home. I descended back into the clouds and began the approach to my home base. The weather had deteriorated. It was now 300-foot ceiling with 1 mile visibility in snow. I descended to 1,500 feet above the ground, slowed to 180 miles an hour, put down my landing gear, and turned on my landing lights. I was now relying entirely on my instruments for flying, but I was a good instrument pilot and felt proficient, and I could handle this one. Radar on the ground had good contact with me. They gave me precise instructions to keep me right on the center line and said, "You're approaching the glide path, start your descent. I eased back the power and started down. Suddenly the plane surged. An electrical power surge went through the airplane. The generators failed. The lights went out. The only lights remaining were the little emergency lights powered by the battery. My radar screen went blank. My instruments failed and off flags appeared. Without instruments, I couldn't fly the airplane. Anything I did was likely to be wrong, so I took my hands completely off the controls, let God have it. The radio worked on the battery though, and I heard the controller say, "You're going 50, 100, 250 feet below the glide path. Pull up, pull up." I had no idea which way was up. I could be dead in a few seconds. It was time to eject. My hands quivered over the ejection handles, but then I remembered that emergency power test switch. Emergency power should have come on automatically, but it hadn't. I didn't know why, but I reached over and jammed my finger on the test switch. Suddenly, the power came back on. The instruments sprang back to life and showed me that I was in a very steep right bank and headed down to the ground very quickly. I quickly rolled my wings level and pulled back on the stick to get out of the dive. I broke out through the bottom of the clouds and saw a house in front of me. I was so low as I passed over the house that I could see that there was light on in the upstairs window and there was a man sitting at a desk. I continued on, pulled up into the clouds, and continued my approach. Now that I had emergency electrical power, I had no more problems. I landed, and as I stopped at the end runway and turned off, I opened my canopy. The cold air and the snow blowing in on me felt good. I was alive. This story and many others can be found in my book, The Spirit of Attack.